the word Gnostic simply means somebody who knows.
To
It
know.
comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means know, to know, to know. And so Gnostics there are various groups of Gnostics. The differences among them, just like the Greek Orthodox versus the Moormans, they're very different. But they did agree that knowledge was the way of salvation, and that it's not Christ's death that brings about salvation. It's the secret knowledge that he revealed. And he revealed how people can understand the world and reality and who they really are, so that they can escape the material trappings of this world to return to the spiritual home they came from.
Dr.
I'm
Bart
pardon my
Ehrman.
voice, Neil, because I've had a cold, and so we'll pray for the best.
Yes, we will. I just got off a cold myself, so
Okay. All
I
right.
feel for you. And I just purchased a webinar that is next week, hosted by yours truly. So tell anybody in my audience who hasn't heard about it yet how they can get there.
Well, so if they just go to bartehrman.com/Christmas, or I suppose you'll probably be posting a link. Maybe this is going to be a lot of fun. So it's going to be on Sunday, December 5th. It's going to be an all-day webinar. I'm giving 4 lectures. My voice will be better by then. I'm going to give 4 lectures back to back, lunch break back to back, and people will be able to ask questions. I'll answer the question, as many questions as I get, and the entire webinar is going to be on the topic: did the Christmas story really happen? And so, what do you know? What do we know about the birth of Jesus, if anything? We got legends, you got history. Is what can you tell really happened? You got these stories in the New Testament. You got stories outside the New Testament. Are any of them plausible? How do we know? The whole shebang. And so it'll be a full day thing. And so people are welcome to come. I hope they can come, because it's a nice time of the year to talk about this kind of thing.
And it is the season, so perfect timing. And so this book right here, it's one of my favorites, and it's one that you wrote. How long? Like
Long time ago.
Long time ago. Okay, so
My youth.
so I want to ask you about the. First of all, let's start with this. Let's do a true or false. You can just tell me true or false, and then you can elaborate.
Okay.
So is this true or false that Christians now, with all these sects and denominations, you got Mormons, you got Catholics, you got evangelicals, they disagree on so much stuff that they probably disagree more than the Christians in the original 2nd century would. The Christians in the 2nd and 1st century must have agreed on everything, because they're right off the time Jesus was alive, right? True or false?
False. So it's what I used to think. But all you have to do is read the early sources of Christianity, and you see, oh my goodness, it's crazily diverse. In the 2nd century, you've got church fathers who are attacking Christian groups that claim to be Christian, claim to be followers of Jesus, claim they have support in biblical writings for their views that there are 2 different gods. It's not just like the gods different in the Old Testament, New Testament. There are literally 2 different gods. Some say there are 12 gods. There are Christians who say they're followers of Jesus who say there are 36 gods. We know one group that says there are 365 gods. They're Christian. And so the views are just so far all over the map. You would think, well, that's got to be like, after a few hundred years, things split off. No, right off the bat, in the 2nd century, we would definitely have that. And one of the interesting questions of scholarship is, how early does the diversity go? What's really interesting that most people haven't noticed is that when Paul writes his letters in the New Testament, virtually every letter, he's attacking other Christians who have false views that completely disagree with his. Ha!
Right.
Yeah, we don't have their writings. That would be
yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about these groups now. You got the Marcionites, right, on one side, and they don't like the Old Testament God. That's, they think that's the Demiurge. I don't know if you call them Gnostics or not. And then on the other side, you got the Ebionites, who are followers of the Torah. They pretty much the exact opposite. They love the Old Testament. They follow the laws. They do kosher. They do all that stuff. And then you got what I guess you would call the Proto-Orthodox ones, who are kind of in a different camp.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on what the differences are with those?
Yeah. So no, you got it right. So the Marcionites are followers of a man named Marcin, who was a teacher theologian, who said, look, the God of the Old Testament really is not the God of the New Testament. I mean, just look at it. In the Old Testament, God tells his people to go into the city of Jericho and destroy it. They march around the city once a day for 6 days, and the seventh day walk around 7 times, blow the trumpets, the walls fall down, and then God tells them, go in there and slaughter every man, woman, and child and animal in the city. Is that the same God who says, love your neighbor?
Doesn't
Love
sound
your
like it.
enemy? Pray for those who persecute you? No, that's a different God. And
Right.
so Marcin really thought there were two gods. The God of the Old Testament created this world, which is why it's such a mess. And the God of Jesus came to save people from that God. So the God of Jesus is not the creator, not the God of the Old Testament. It's a different God. So he thought that. Then you've got people on the other side of the fence who are Jews. They're raised Jewish or they became Jewish, who say, no, the God of the Old Testament is the Christian God. And in fact, Jesus is the son of that God. And Jesus did not cancel the Old Testament. When God said don't eat pork, it means you're not supposed to eat pork. He didn't change his mind. And so if you're going to be a follower of the Jewish Messiah, from the Jewish God to the Jewish people to fulfill the Jewish law, you got to be Jewish. And so one is like completely opposed to Judaism. The other is embracing Judaism. They're both claiming to be followers of Jesus. And that doesn't bring into account all of the Gnostic groups that are really bizarre by modern thinking,
Right.
that are really impossible to explain in 1 minute.
Right.
But so yeah, you get all of these diverse groups going on.
And so with Marcion, you got an interesting story with him. He goes to Rome and he's trying to sell his version of Christianity there, and it sort of fails. What happens with that?
So Marcion was the traditional dating is that Marcion was in the middle of the 2nd century, and that he's from the north central Turkey, on the shore of the Black Sea, and he ended up developing his own theological system that I was just explaining a little bit of.
Right.
And he decided to go to Rome in the year 139, and he spent about 5 years in Rome, developing his system and writing books. And then he presented his views to the Roman hierarchy of the church, the leaders of the Roman church, hoping that they would accept his perspective as being the authoritative view. But instead, they rejected it and kicked him out of the church.
Right.
And so then he went around Asia Minor and he started starting his own churches, and he was very, very successful. There were areas in what's now Turkey that were predominantly Marcionite. This was the kind of Christianity they had. And I would say that a lot of Christians today are still Marcionite. A lot of Christians say, "Yeah, we don't follow the Old Testament, or we don't keep the Old Testament God. He's the God of wrath. We follow the God of love." Well, okay, but I mean that's Marcionite.
That's a good point. And they don't even realize they're doing that. They just kind of are